Welcome to the Catalyst Sale Podcast. Many of us struggle with sales. This could be due to lacking confidence, comfort, or just not wanting to be salesy. We want to help our customers. We know we can, but we complicate the process. This podcast is designed to help folks like you improve its sales through process, practice, framework, and thinking. I'm Mike Simmons. I'm the founder of Catalyst Sale and CRO at CyBSafe. And today I have Darryl Praill, the CRO of VanillaSoft, on the podcast. This is an awesome conversation with Darryl. I ended up joining him on an episode of his podcast. We'll include links in the show notes for that episode. Why don't we get to the conversation? Darryl, it is awesome to finally have you on the Catalyst Sale podcast. How are you?
I'm doing well, Mike. Yourself, man?
I am doing great. We were just joking about how the beginning of the year has been. And I feel like the Dunkin' Donuts guy from the old commercials, and this just demonstrates my age from back in like the 80s, where the guy would go out and make the donuts every morning. And then at one point he actually runs into himself saying, it's time to make the donuts. And the other guy says, I've made the donuts. So that's how I feel right now. I am optimistic that I'm about a week away from catching up. And I'm sure there's something on the other side of that week that I have no idea is coming that will put me right back into the same place. So other than that, I'm doing great. I live in Arizona. It'll be 70 degrees later today. I'm not doing the Celsius to Fahrenheit stuff. That's
okay.
Other than
I'm a child of the 60s when I was born. We won't say what year. So I think, what was that? I think I was in grade 5 here in Canada. Don't quote me on that one. Or maybe it was grade 3, one of those two, when we officially did the conversion from imperial to metric. So, I can tell you how much I weigh in pounds. I can tell you how tall I am in both metric and in imperial. I drive in metric. I weigh in imperial, I measure in imperial. So, and I can tell you there's 2.54 centimeters per standard imperial inch. And there's also 2.2 pounds per kilogram. I could go on. I'm that guy that spans the air. My wife wants the thermostat in the house in Fahrenheit. I have the thermostat in the house in Celsius. We're just conflicted.
That is absolutely awesome. So do you, this sounds like when someone learns a new language and becomes really proficient in the language, and they go from, I'm going to speak in the new language, but think in the old language.
Yes.
To all of a sudden I start dreaming in the new language. So are you a dreamer in the new language?
I have this sense of guilt, call it Canadian stupid pride, where I'm like, I'm a bit of a hypocrite that I say on a good day with my platform shoes, I'm a whopping 5'8". But I can tell you that, I'm like, Europeans, they're all in on metric, right? So I'm like, okay, I'm 172 centimeters tall. Don't ask me how many kilograms I am. I'm embarrassed to tell you that. So yeah, I do both. And it's so funny you use an analogy, because when I was in grade 10, I went, for those who don't know, Canada's bilingual. We have the province of Quebec, so we're French and English officially. And so I went on a 3-month exchange I swapped places with a French student. They came here to Ontario. I went to Quebec. And it's true what you say. I had the basics, the rudimentary school. I didn't know, the biggest lesson. I remember getting on the train for this 8-hour drive, and they give you this handout of all common expressions. And the one I used over and over again was plus lentement, s'il vous plaît, which means more slowly, please. So you would say something as Frenchman, and I'm like staring at you like I have no idea what you just said. So I'd say plus lentement, s'il vous plaît. And then they would say it slower. And it was the weirdest thing. Exactly as you said, within about 2 weeks, I remember lying in bed, and it was the weirdest thing. And I'm having a conversation in my head in French, and then I hit into the block. I don't know what the word is. And in my head, I switched to English, and I go, okay, what's that word in French? And all of a sudden I realized what the hell I just did. And I'm like, oh, Praill, you're in bed. You can do English. It's okay. So it is true.
It's awesome. I'm finding as I write notes, I'm actually starting to add you to behavior. And it's driving me absolutely freaking nuts. And it's...
You added to color and to neighbor and to candor.
It is absolutely insane.
You see, that's a good example, right? Because so I was born and raised on the US-Canada border, right outside Detroit on the Windsor side. And so for us, I like to say I'm bilingual in Canadian and American, right? So I know which letters to drop. Like when I'm talking to you, I'll say, X, Y, Z. But I know when I'm talking to a Canadian audience, I go to X, Y, Z. Stupid things like that, right? So it's so true. And it's like, I have this, like, here's something you can't relate to, but we Canadians do. When I get my phone or a new computer and you're going through this setup and it gets to that point and it says language, you guys just say English. or US or whatever, right? And I am like, hey, so am I English? Am I Canadian? Do they have a Canadian option? What do you mean they don't have a Canadian option? And then they get indignant, and there you go.
Well, and then we look at it. It's like, so the conversation right now is around international English.
Yes.
And for me, I think international English, I think of stuff outside of the States, because
that's right.
The States is the center of the universe, right? But then as you're talking with people outside of the States, and I know this is going to seem obvious to people, and I'm really not. I don't think I'm this dumb.
Actually, it's not obvious to a lot of people. They're always shocked.
It is on that. It's when we're talking about international, it's everything out. We end up being the international piece. And there was a key point in time that this hit me. And it was when I was working at O'Reilly, I realized how much I liked working on emerging market type stuff, going into new markets. And then I realized, man, there are a lot of people outside of the US who are looking at the US as an emerging market, or outside of North America who are looking at North America as an emerging market. And that was a huge shift. And I know there's, again, a lot of people are out there nodding, saying, how is that not a shift? Why would you be so biased in your view and think of emerging markets as being something out there?
It's not bias.
Why not?
It's a lack of experience. I mean, I can speak to it personally, right? And because I've lived in the States multiple times. And so I have context. And through no fault of your own, this is just the reality of history and global economics. You guys are the economic leader. We all quote in US dollars. I'm Canadian, and I quote my software and services in US dollars. You guys are the political leaders, if you will, of the world to keep, peace and goodwill and everyone in their best behavior. So you're in that situation. And then you think about it, if you live in the States, because so basically what I'm getting at is because of that, everybody kind of comes to you. We're going to have a meeting. We're going to meet in New York or Boston or LA or Arkansas, if you are a Walmart employee. And the second thing there is you've got 50 states across a lot of latitude and longitudes across multiple time zones. Plus you got these territories, you got, Hawaii, you got these territories like Puerto Rico. In all honesty, you guys, you want to go skiing? You can go somewhere and go skiing. You want to go tropical? You can go somewhere and go tropical. You never really truly need to leave your own country. So a lot of Americans don't have passports. And because of that, they never get exposed to the BBC or to any other, international news source. And so I get it. I truly, truly get it. It always amazes us on the outside looking in, which is totally unfair to the Americans. I'm going to say this, my preamble, that I can tell you probably as much or more about your political machinations and what's going on with your leadership race. But if I were to turn around and ask most Americans, and again, I'm not judging, it's a statement, who's the Prime Minister of Canada? Simple question.
Is it still Trudeau?
It's still Trudeau. Good stuff.
Okay.
You knew
to make sure.
It was pretty boy Justin Trudeau. And, that's a simple thing, right? Like, who's the leader of the UK? Who's the leader of France or Germany, et cetera? So I don't blame you folks. You have a unique circumstance where you don't necessarily need to leave your country and you have all the benefits. And I covet that. The biggest thing here in Canada is we're like, do you think we can convince Puerto Rico to leave the US and we'll give them we'll make them a province, not a territory, like give them full voting rights, everything. We'll give them all our, socialized healthcare. We'll give them carte blanche just so we have someplace warm to go to and can actually vacation and spend money in our own currency and not have to pay a 35% markup when we go to the US.
I thought you just went to Cuba. Isn't Cuba?
Well, we go to Cuba. I mean,
Yeah.
we can do that. The Cubans love Canadians. But of course, in COVID, I can't do that because that's an international destination. But I could if it was Puerto Rico.
So where I live in Arizona, we have a number of snowbirds who come from
snowbirds, Florida and Arizona.
Calgary. They come from, so they'll come from Calgary. They'll come from Toronto. They'll come from all over Canada, but they will converge. And because of some of the challenges with the healthcare and systems and whatnot, there are houses in the neighborhood where now we would have Canadians who live in the neighborhood part of the year. Those houses continue to be closed up because they weren't able to make the trip. Now, there are a lot of people out there who are wondering, I'm listening to the Catalyst Sale podcast. I know sometimes we get on crazy tangents. And today we've talked about donuts. We've talked about politics. We've talked about language. We've talked about dreaming. And we've talked about snowbirds. And we even got COVID in here. So it just demonstrates the range of a conversation you can have with someone. The theme here, and I think there's a good tie, and I'm going to take a reach on this one, but moving from country to country is kind of like the conversation between sales and marketing in some organizations, where we're talking one language on the sales side and a completely different language on the marketing side. And I had never thought about going to the province of Quebec as from an international exchange perspective inside the same country. That just blew my mind. And then I started thinking, where would we exchange here in the States? And it probably would be with Massachusetts, because I think of that as its own country. And now all of my friends in Boston are like, and yeah, so we won't go down that direction. But let's talk about this in the context of sales and marketing and the challenges that we create inside our organizations, because organizations, how we align inside these organizations and the language that we use and biases that we create, lack of experience. What do you see a tie in here?
I'm impressed with your bridging. I got to tell you that, the fact that you bridged that and you brought it back to, kind of Canada, US sales and marketing. We all think we're speaking English and we all think we have the same cultural identities. When the reality is it looks that way on the surface and everybody does kumbaya, but it's not until you move there that you realize there are in fact differences. And all of a sudden you realize that's why we don't get along sometimes. Yeah. So I've never heard that analogy before, but that actually, I know you were desperately trying to bridge it, but that actually works out really, really well. That's a good tie-in. I got to give you kudos for that one.
This is my skill. And
you are a natural.
So it's not, and it's funny, I think, so here's my view. This is why I think I can do this really well. One, I believe I listen well. Now, Jen will tell you that I don't, my spouse. I believe I am a good listener. I also have created enough diverse experience where I've not stayed in the same lane for an extended period of time that you start to identify patterns that you can connect the dots across experiences. And I've also figured out that if we're having a conversation around a complex topic, if I can tie it to something that somebody knows, then we can make that a little bit simpler. So I can have a conversation about, if I know that you are a hockey fan, I can talk about sales in the context of hockey. Or if I know you're a football fan, I can, and it's a global football versus US football, we can talk about in the context there. Or if you've competed in band, we can talk about in the context there. So it's not something to really be impressed by. It's just, we all can do it. We all can do the pattern recognition. The challenge that we have, I think, as a group is we don't give ourselves enough diverse experiences out there in the world to be able to see it from other people's perspective. So I would challenge everybody out there to go out and talk to others in other areas, and you'll start to identify these patterns and you'll be able to create those bridges in things that are seemingly not connected at all and start to connect the dots there. So, but thank you, Darryl.
I want to actually drill down on that if it's okay with you.
Yeah.
Because I really like where you're going with this. So from a sales point of view, I think, and I'm saying sales point of view, but this applies to any discipline, whether you're a firefighter or anything else, but we'll stick in the sales and marketing community for a second. I find a lot of sales reps who are lifelong sales reps struggle with this. And because they only know the world from one perspective. And so, for example, you talked about sales and marketing alignment. There's a classic expression, and I don't remember the whole expression, but the premise is, walk a mile in my shoes. And all of a sudden you'll have a better idea of the journey I walk every day. And so half of that is a legit expression. Half of it, I made that up just so you understand. And I watch that. And I especially see this in newer sales reps. Like, so if I say something that you guys go, that's hitting close to home, it's nothing personal. I'll hear reps say, sales drives the company. Without sales, this company would be nowhere. We're the ones bringing in the money, not you in marketing. You guys do pretty press releases and brochures. We're on the front lines, not you in marketing. And that's like the furthest thing from the truth. That would be like, tell me if you can relate to this. That would be like a Republican saying, my view of economics and healthcare is the only view that makes any sense. That's it. Nobody else has a legitimate opinion except me. And a Democrat can equally do the exact same thing. And that's why you have misalignment and sometimes a small run on a Capitol building. So, the whole idea here is, so let me tell you this, and especially if you're in sales, let me help you out here. The reason you want to dabble outside of your discipline is so that it will actually make you a better salesperson. So imagine this. Imagine you're a sales rep and you sell a marketing product, marketing technology, HubSpot, Marketo. So let's say you're selling marketing tools, software, tools like HubSpot, Marketo. I don't know, the list goes on, but you're a sales rep. But if you had done marketing, then you would be able to have a very personal conversation with your prospects. It would be very relational. It would be you would connect because you would have shared experiences. The whole point there is the only way you can do that is if you have done marketing. And so that brings us back to dabbling. Dabbling, sometimes people say, oh, you can't focus. For me, I wish I was smart enough to say that I was intentionally dabbling, but the truth was I lost my attention. So my career path, I graduated as a computer science person. I started off selling, say, photocopiers door to door. Then I got back into coding. Then I got into product management, then product marketing, then marketing and sales, and then sales. And so you see the dabble. That allows me to connect to a lot of different audiences where they reside. So for a salesperson, this is critical. For a marketer, this is critical. The thing I like to tell salespeople who don't have this diversity is you're going to sit here and tell me that this company is nothing without you, that you don't have, that you drive the revenue machine. Really? So you're telling me all of the people behind the scenes, the engineers, the coders, whoever it might be, who gave you a product to sell in the first place, that's sellable, that they had no contribution to your success? The people who made your brand a household name, they had no contribution to you being able to get past the gatekeeper because they recognize you? That's just a bull crap point of view. So your point about sales and marketing alignment or about international relations truly comes back to having an intentional perspective. For me, I take it beyond just my career. I put it into my life. So for example, on my radio, and I'm not going to name names, so I'm just going to say I'm not going to tell you what I listen to mostly, but I have Fox and MSNBC and CNN. And I go back and forth with all the channels because I want to understand all sides and all perspectives. I may not agree with all sides, but I at least want to understand. So my question to you sales folks, especially as you pursue that quota, are you being intentional about understanding, everybody's perspective? Same thing if you're creating training content, for example, sales enablement, learning development, whatever it might be. Do you understand the people that you're creating content for and how they perceive things? So anyway, that's it. I'll get off my soapbox now, Mike. I'm sorry.
I think it's a great point. It highlights the importance of, I'm saying diversity again, getting a diverse set of experiences that you pick up along the road. And what a lot of people do in the sales profession is there are a lot of people who will get 3 years of experience 10 times over. And that could be 3 years of experience in inside sales. And ultimately, they maybe are delivering a different product each time that they get that experience, but they haven't significantly changed the way that they approach things or the type of customers that they're working with or the type of conversations. They're just doing the same job in different places versus somebody who goes out and goes down the path that you went down, which is they're doing some sales and then they move into product marketing and then they're in product management. And I'm going to miss on your journey as you went through it, but there were these areas that you'd work. For me, I started on the operations side. I was at UPS. And then I moved into an ed tech company as a learning manager, which today probably would be closely aligned with what a customer success role would look like. Did some account management, some account executives. I'd build sales teams, indirect, direct, like there are all of these various experiences. And each time that I did it, I realized I stayed in those roles just a little bit too long. I could have moved earlier, and ego came into play a couple of times. Loyalty to a role or loyalty to an organization came in a couple of ways, but you don't have to take all of this time to do that. Like there are other ways for you to get experience. One of those ways is to go and just ask the people inside your company, why do they do what they do? How do they do it? Where do they struggle? If you're selling to CFOs and you haven't had a conversation with the CFO inside your organization about how they buy, you are completely missing an opportunity. And I can also speak very candidly about this. Anybody inside an organization who's asked me for time to understand how sales works in the organization, I am happy to sit down and have that conversation with them, and we'll make the time available. So we just have to ask. So I'll ask you, Darryl, what do you think about the just asking? And then why do you think we struggle with just asking?
So it's funny, even as you were talking about it, before you asked me, what do I think about it? In my mind, I'm like, I'm going to pounce on that point. That just ask, okay, if you want the cheapest source of information that's going to have the most profound impact on your success, exactly as Mike said, here's something crazy. I want you to do this. I want you to go and identify, maybe go to somebody in your team, maybe somebody in the success or support or whomever, somebody who's really in tune with your install base. And I want you to say, I want to talk to 10 different customers with a variety of experiences, but who've been with us for a while. So they have context. There's a relationship there. They will take our call and give me those names. And then I want you to spend like a half hour minimum on each one and just ask them, help me understand why you invested in our offering. What were you experiencing? What did that look like? I'm not trying to sell you a single thing. I just want to understand who was bitching, who was moaning, who was lamenting. What were the considerations that you gave towards other solutions? Why did you not go there? Help me understand. Okay, you got us. What was the process like? What have you seen work well? Where have we fallen short? What surprised you? What disappointed you because you had high expectations, which is not necessarily our tool, it was just misaligned. All these conversations, just ask. When you do this, two things immediately happen. One, you really start to understand your prospect because your customer was your prospect and now they're going to go through the exact same things, titles, everything else. So that's the first thing. Second thing is you start to understand how to engage prospects because you've got context. So, so if all my customers, 80% of them had this exact same problem, I can now reach out to my prospects and say, do you have this problem? And there's a third thing. I know I said two things, so there's a third thing, which is really, really important, is now you can do storytelling. And this is like the most powerful secret sauce ever. So now when you prospect someone, you say, hey, do you have this problem? Because a lot of our clients do. And if so, I can help you understand the challenges you're going to face with some of the options. Maybe we're one, maybe we're not, but hey, let's connect. They say, okay, because I got this problem. Let's connect. So you connect. Now you're talking, you're doing the thing. And they say, yeah, we got this problem here. And now you drop into storytelling. It's funny you say that. I was just talking to Mike Simmons last week, and he's a client of ours. And he was saying the exact same thing. In fact, this is exactly what Mike said. Mike said, ding, 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 ding. Does that relate to you? It does. Yeah, I figured it might. You know what? You might want to meet Mike so you guys can compare notes. Would you want me to make that happen? So here's the beauty. Mike is already your customer. You did storytelling. This customer doesn't feel alone. They feel like you all of a sudden get it because you did storytelling. You talked about other people who had the same shared problem. So they're going to call Mike because you made an introduction. Aren't you a great person? Mike's going to say, yep, I had the same problem and this is how we solved it. Oh, wait a minute. Mike solved it using your solution. And then you're going to follow up and say, so how'd that conversation go with Mike? How did he help you out? What more can I do for you? When you reach out to these people, you're going to, as I said, you're going to do storytelling. You're going to say, most of our clients have this problem. Is that something you've got too? Because if so, I can help you out with that. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to say, yeah, I do. And you're going to say, great. You know what? 9 times out of 10, this is what's going to happen. They talk to each other. They connect. They share experiences. They go, oh, I can really trust that Mike guy. And then you follow up with them and you say, how'd that go? And they say, oh, Mike was so helpful, insightful. Mike mentioned this. Is that something you can show me that you guys helped them with? And you're going to go, absolutely. All of that happened simply because of storytelling. All of that happened because you went and you asked a whole bunch of people to understand where they're coming from, what their life was like. That's it. You weren't stuck by an existing script you were given. You overcome any imposter syndrome you may have, thinking that I don't know what I'm talking about, because when you ask, suddenly you do know what you're talking about. So that's the power of just asking. And it's free. Did I mention it's free? It's free. So, and it has a dramatic impact on your success.
I think so my opinion on this, and all of this is really good stuff. My opinion is that we as sales leaders, marketing leaders, or leaders in an organization, and a lot of this depends on the scale and scope of the organization, we create an arbitrary level of urgency that doesn't give our team the comfort or flexibility in asking those questions. They feel like they just have to push things forward. And what I would challenge all of you to do as you take Darryl's feedback on how to go through the process is do these things because they're going to have a positive impact on the business in 3 to 6 months, not because they're going to have a positive impact on the business tomorrow or change the number tomorrow. But if you wait 3 to 6 months to start doing it, you're still pushing that horizon out. And the story I like to use around this is that old quote that I like to butcher, which is, when is the best time to plant a tree? It's 20 years ago. When's the second best time to plant a tree? Today. Start doing the work. It will have a positive impact on what you do, how you help your customers, the context that you can deliver things in. But you have to start today, and don't make it about you. It becomes about you when you try to rush it. You stay too focused on KPIs and whether or not you're closing a conversation and all of those other things. What do you think, Darryl?
I mean, you nailed it. So, I mean, a perfect story. This is a marketing story. You know, one of the things that when I took on the marketing job initially at VanillaSoft was we wanted to get these insights on our target audience, our customers, everything else, and our marketing effectiveness. And so what do? We created this whole, cool lead source tracking database with all these insights. And then 6 months later, we realized, we don't have this answer, or this answer, or this answer. Why not? Oh, because we don't track those pieces of data. And so we're like, okay, I wish I would have done that 6 months ago. We did that 3 times. So 1.5 years until we finally got to the point we said, okay, we have all the data we have. I can't fix the past. But from that point on, it was great. So there is no time like the present to do it. And you should do it. And it will pay spades. And yeah, you should have done it months ago. Don't worry about it. Don't beat yourself up.
So how do we get ourselves into this idea of, and I'm going to just continue to lean into the idea of being a foreign exchange student in other aspects of the business. How can we create a culture? Do you have any recommendations or ideas around how we can create a culture where people feel comfortable opening up to the idea of foreign exchange, cross-team collaboration inside organizations, and not just Slack exchanges going back and forth, but deep conversations around how things work and why they work and how those might apply to other things that we're doing out in the marketplace. Whether it's, we use the example of the CFO, we've talked about the sales and marketing discussion. There's a product discussion to be had and operations discussion to be had as well. But how do we facilitate a culture of foreign exchange inside an organization?
I'll be really blunt with you. It's hard. It's really hard. And you have to be, especially if that's not how the organization has been historically wired. And you have to be intentional about it. Some of the things I did when I became CRO of the company, because same thing, right? We've got success, we've got sales, we got marketing. When I was just the head of marketing, my team was rocking. And if sales dropped the ball, not my problem. I'd go to the CEO and say, you should fix that because I'm doing my job. But then suddenly I was a CRO and I owned it all. And so I realized early on that I was managing my team as multiple individual silos. So I talked to the marketers, so I talked to the sales reps. And I realized that was a mistake because it was doing exactly what Mike's talking about here. So we did a couple of things. One thing we did was we created actual teams. I called them the revenue team, and of all the direct reports. And we would get together once a week in a live conversation. And it was, everybody had to submit a document of what their team were working on that week in advance, with shared document. And then we went around the room for 1 hour, and you were only allowed to talk about 3 things max. You couldn't go and give me a diatribe, because the whole point was to bring up the top 3 issues and then bring an issue to the team for troubleshooting. Even if you didn't have one, bring it. Even if you're contemplating something new, what do you think of this idea? So that was intentional, because what I wanted to do is I want to create a community, people who supported one another and invested in one another. So for example, if the sales rep, the sales leader says, I'm thinking of doing this, what do you folks think? And then the marketing leader says, well, I think you should do this. And the sales leader says, that's a good idea. Let me try that. Well, now the marketing leader is invested because that was their idea. So now if shit hits the fan, marketing is going to go to the rest of the company and say, no, the sales leader was doing the right thing. In other words, they're backing each other up. That's huge. So that's the first thing I did. Second thing I did was then I started doing the smaller versions of that. So I would start, so for example, and I did this, here's an example. I did it yesterday where I'm like, okay, I want to talk about our quota, our sales rep quotas and the commission frameworks optimal based on the desired behaviors we want. So I brought together the leader from sales enablement, the leader from RevOps, the leader from sales, and myself. And my leader from sales actually sent me a message saying, Darryl, why are they there? This is my team. And I'm like, because we're a revenue team and they're going to have different perspectives that you hadn't thought of. So we had a conversation and it was great because, where the salesperson would say, well, we want to drive these outcomes. My RevOps person would say, well, wait a minute, we want to drive, these outcomes, which are different behaviors that the salesperson hadn't even thought about. But upon reflection, you go, you know what, that makes a lot of sense. So when the whole meeting was done, my sales leader came back to me and they said, I know I was reticent to do that, but that was a really good meeting. And I said, well, that's what we're here for. We're a team. So it's forcing them to be in those situations, just like when you were a kid, right? And the teacher would put you in a small group to work together with that person you didn't like because they were popular and you were still picking your nose. The reality was it was forcing each other to learn from each other and to work together and to understand, again, their different perspectives. You're dabbling across departments, you're dabbling across personalities, and now you are much more relational, empathetic, and productive. And here's the biggest thing of all. Okay, so we talked about storytelling before. When you do this, okay, the secret sauce, you now have relationships in other departments. So for example, I make sure my sales engineers are part of the weekly support calls and part of the weekly success calls. Why? Because sometimes I'm going to have a prospect who's maybe in a free trial and they're not getting great support. If I go through my channel, top down, my colleague may get their back up and say, I run my team, bugger off, Praill. Or I can back channel it through the relationships because they meet every single week. So they know each other and they like each other and they laugh together and they drink together and they'll get resolution quickly. So different ways of handling it. You can do top down, you can do bottom up, force them all together. But if you do that, pretty much everybody's invested in everybody else's success.
As folks will listen to the podcast know, and I announced this a couple of episodes ago, I've taken on a CRO role within CyberSafe. So I'm a newly minted CRO inside a organization that focuses on the human aspect of cybersecurity. Inside, I'm doing the things that Darryl's describing. And the key thing to remember as you do this is it's not easy. It will take time. And everybody will come along on this journey at different stages that make sense for them. The mistake I think a lot of people make when it comes to doing this type of work is they try to bring too many people together in the same room at the same time without properly working through the smaller group type discussions. And as you do this, you might look at it and say, okay, perfect. This sounds awesome. I'm going to bring all these leaders together as a group, and we're going to hash out some stuff around a thorny challenge that we've got related to compensation. And if that team doesn't have the same kind of rapport or connection or trust, and they should have that because they've worked together with each other for a long period of time, but many times they've operated on tough challenges in their own silos. They've not necessarily crossed teams to address those challenges. You've got to remember, give them some time and space so that everybody understands the intention and the desired outcome here. One of the things I've implemented is I've opened up one of the sales meetings that we have when we meet weekly on a Monday. One of those sales meetings per month is open to the entire organization. Anybody on the team can join in that conversation. They can listen so that they see what's happening. They can share information and they know the entire team is there. Everybody that's in this revenue team. So demand, acquisition, retention, and growth, we're all together. They can share information or they can ask the team for insight and gather information that they can apply to their team. And that's available to anybody in the organization because we're working on continuing to reinforce a spirit of transparency and communication and collaboration across the teams. Start small, though. If you try to do it too big, you might bite off a bit more than you can chew, and then you run into some false starts and stalls that'll become challenging. Take a change management approach to doing it. Break the problem down into smaller parts and go out there and actually execute.
What he said.
Awesome. Darryl, this is great. I want to continue to keep having you on the podcast as we go along, because it's good to have someone say what he said and also have someone identify that, hey, this stuff that we're talking about, it's not as complex as a lot of people will make it seem. We connected the dots between donuts and language and experiences in other countries and travel and diversity and sales and marketing and leveraging experience and just asking questions and being quiet and waiting for the answer. All of these things are things that you all do in your daily job and at home throughout the day. Yet when we, for whatever reason, when we start to put money behind it, things start to get complex. And the thing that I think creates that are the personal agendas that we all have as we go through it, and confidence and comfort. So, Darryl, how can people what are some things that people can do to get comfortable with the idea that the first time that they do something, it's not going to work out really well and they're going to learn, but they feel comfortable, they're going to iterate? Like, how, as you've gone through these things that you've learned, and I'm sure you've made mistakes. You talked about one of them. You started doing a bunch of stuff and then realized, oh, we weren't tracking that. Well, now we're going to go back and track it and we'll gather the information going forward. But you learn and you iterate. What's your learning and iteration process?
That's a really good question. This is one of the very few, I don't want to say distinctive, but every individual or every leader in an organization has got their own style of leadership. You suck at many and you're okay at some and you're good at others. One of the ones I'm good at, and I try to instill in my team, and let me share this with your crew now, is, and sales reps will have heard this before, but if you're not in sales, let me tell you, it's called mindset. So the mindset I like to have is this. Listen, if you do something and you made a mistake, that's okay. You have to have the mindset where you give yourself permission to fail. Now, there's a lot of things going on with this statement. Giving yourself permission to fail for many people is hard as hell. You're a perfectionist. You have high expectations. Your parents yelled at you. They called you stupid. They slapped you around. Whatever your baggage may be, hey, that's legit. It's totally legit, but only you can give yourself that permission. And here's why you should give yourself permission. Because you're going to give yourself permission to fix your mistake. So I messed up. I forgot some stuff. Okay, shame on me. Let's do it again. Let's go tweak it. All right. And then the third time it happened was just because we wanted to do some new metrics we had never fathomed before. So therefore, why were we not tracking that information? That was not a mistake. That was just circumstances changed. I tell my staff all the time, if you're not taking risks, you're not moving the ball forward. You're just doing the same old. And then why would you stand out from anybody else in an organization? Why would you stand out from your competition? You're vanilla, they're vanilla. You only learn from taking risks. Now, if you repeat the same mistake more than once, then that's a problem. And that's what I tell my team. So everybody's got permission to make mistakes. Just tell me. And it's hilarious. I watch it over and over again over the years, despite them working with me. Well, they come to me and they say, yeah, we screwed up here. And they're waiting for me to go, and I'm like, okay, well, I can't change it. What's done is done. It's water under the bridge. What did you learn from it? What should we have done? We should have done this. Okay. Well, now you know what to do next time. And I move on. And when I show grace, or when you show grace to your colleagues, your bosses, your employees, and you give them permission to make a mistake, what will happen is remarkable. They'll start taking you up on that permission. And they'll start doing things that you had never thought of. And then the results will blow your mind because this is a different way of looking at it. So mindset, give yourself permission to make mistakes. Take risks intentionally. Recognize that you might fail, but also recognize you're going to learn and recognize you actually might be right and you're going to kick ass. So it's all mindset.
Darryl, anytime someone talks about mindset, I know some people will roll their eyes a little bit and they'll say, okay, well, that sounds fluffy. And how do you define it? And there's some great books out there that talk about mindset and the importance of mindset. I think you laid out some really important things about mindset. And I like this framework of being able to give people the freedom to take risks, to test, be okay with failure. There's a quote that is one of my favorite quotes in general. And I'm big on quotes. Marie Antoinette quote is a big one. I butcher quotes. Marie Antoinette is the one that there's nothing new but what we've have forgotten. This one comes from Admiral Payne, who is Lee Cockrell's father-in-law. And his quote is, do your best and forgive yourself. And I think if we, as a group, as we lead our teams, can help them know that they're going to go out there and they're going to do their best. And ultimately, they have the ability to forgive themselves when things either work out or don't work out, but they put the right stuff forward. It's amazing what can happen inside an organization. Hey, Darryl, if people want to continue the conversation, learn more about what you're doing, see the Drive podcast inside inside sales show, where would you like to send them?
There's lots of places, right? But I'll fall back on the classic standby, which is LinkedIn. Onto LinkedIn, connect with me. You'll see a lot of back content there that I've shared, and some of it's pretty opinionated. So, hey, debate me. I love it. You'll see, even in my more information, you drill down a profile, you see my website, you see my Twitter handle, you see all that wonderful stuff. But LinkedIn's the best place to go. If you really care, you can go to Twitter. My handle is opinionated, or meet me out in Clubhouse. I go there about once a week, usually on a Saturday morning, and I ramble. And my handle there is also opinionated.
And we've seen each other a couple of times on those Clubhouse.
We have
those Clubhouse things on Saturday. Clubhouse is awesome. There's some good and bad that come with it, but check out Darryl on Clubhouse. And on LinkedIn, we'll include links in the show notes. If you know of anybody who would find value in this episode or value in listening to this discussion, wants to get engaged in the discussion, please share the podcast with them. Sales is a thinking process. How are you thinking differently about yours?